This is an important topic, and actually, you might wonder, why is a heart surgeon giving a talk like this? Well, number one, unrelated to my profession, I'm a father, and so this has a lot of relevance. But also, these are my future patients, and this is a very big problem, in our community and in our society as a whole, especially in North America. And so this is something that is of great interest to me, because if we can hit this problem at the primary prevention level, we may do a lot of good in terms of public health. Some of what I'm going to mention in terms of general principles has to do with adults as well, but what I'm going to address here is childhood obesity. Well, obesity, and this is defined not just this way in children, but also in adults. We tend to use body mass index as an important indicator, and body mass index is weight in kilograms over body surface area in meters squared, although there is an easy calculation to do it with standard measurements of pounds and height in feet and inches. But a body mass index that we like to target is between 19 and 24. Overweight is between 25 and 30, and obese is greater than 30. Morbidly obese is greater than 40. For children, we look at their growth charts, and we tend to look at whether they're overweight by measuring the percentile that they fall into. And the 95th percentile or greater puts a child into this category of being overweight or obese. But if you're greater than the 85th percentile, then you are still at significant risk for being overweight. Well, almost 10 million children now in the United States are overweight by that definition. And almost half of all 12 to 21-year-olds are in that same category. So this is just to show you how big a problem this is. And why this is particularly a public health problem is, if you look at the difference over 20 years, from around 1980 to the year 2000, these are just hospital costs. So this doesn't include medical costs outside of the hospital, but just annual hospital costs in order to manage children with obesity-related problems. Those costs have quadrupled. And here is why, in part. If you look at the line, you can see that over the decades between 1960 and 1990, this problem is increasing. Well, here's where we are now. Again, using that 95th percentile as a cutoff, children that are overweight in the 2 to 5 year age group, it's about 10%. And then between 6 and 19 years of age, it's about 15% of our children. Now, if we look at this predictive value for developing obesity in adulthood, we know very well now that obesity in childhood is a positive predictor for obesity in adulthood. And if you look at overweight children compared to obese adults and compare them to healthy children, there's a 70% chance, which is pretty high. There's a 70% chance that an obese or overweight child will become an obese or overweight adult. If both parents are obese, it's a much bigger problem. So, putting that in a different set of numbers here, 15% of overweight infants, so you can see this starts pretty early in life. 15% of overweight infants, 25%, a quarter of preschool children that are overweight, and 80% of obese early teenagers that have one obese parent will go on to be overweight adults. So why is this happening? Well, it seems that in general, if we look at our North American population, it's a population shift. It's a shift in thinking. And that shift is towards a positive energy balance. And by that, I mean that our energy intake in general, the kind of diet we eat, our activity level now in society, our energy intake is greater than our energy expenditure, which is that activity level. So we're taking in more calories than we're expending, and it's a big difference compared to 30, 40 years ago. If you look at, and this is a little bit artificial, but it's just to give you an idea. Only 50 extra calories a day for a whole year will put 5 pounds on. Now, 50 calories is very easy to obtain. 2 Hershey's Kisses is 50 calories. So it's easy to just grab a couple of small chocolates and you've reached that extra. If you do that every day, that's 5 pounds at 1 year. 1 extra can of soda will probably get you 10 pounds extra a year if you're drinking an extra can of soda every day. And the key for children, at least, is to realize that they don't necessarily consume more food than non-obese children, but they consume different foods. And those different foods increase their energy intake because they're higher calories. They're sweeter and they're higher in fat. So it's not the volume of food, it's the kinds of food. And the other problem is activity, as I mentioned. Obese children, on average, watch 2 hours more television than a non-obese child. And they're already watching an average of 2 hours or so a day. So if you look at 8-year-olds, in one study, more than a quarter of 8-year-olds in the United States watch more than 4 hours of television a day. How do you fit 4 hours of television or video games in one day? If you come home from school at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and you go to bed at 9 o'clock, you're spending most of that time in front of the television. And that's more than a quarter of our 8-year-olds in this country. So what is that doing? Well, it's replacing activities. It is reducing basal metabolic rate, because they're sitting and they're not doing much. And it's associated with high calorie food consumption. Why? Because kids tend to come home and snack, and they're also eating dinner, and they're doing that around the television. But they're also watching television that has ads that have to do with high calorie foods. They tend to be things like ads for McDonald's and other type of fast food restaurants, and these are high calorie food type items that generate thought in these children's heads that this is what they want to eat. And so then they go to mom or dad and say, can I have such and such? Can I have such and such? When do they say, can I have a carrot? It doesn't happen very often. So obese children are definitely more sedentary than children that aren't overweight. And a little bit about how in certain studies where there have been attempts to try to solve this problem in very, very focused type of areas, not in terms of the general public, but in terms of trying to take certain groups and find ways to reduce this problem of overweight. If you limit television to less than 2 hours a day, just that one thing will reduce obesity by 18%. If you add 30 minutes a day of vigorous activity, that can reduce the incidence of obesity by 22%. And if you combine that, in other words, if you have not only a limiting television, but then an active activity program with your kids, you can reduce the chance of overweight by 64%. Well, just a little bit about why this energy balance that I talked about, why is this happening? It's multifactorial. There are a lot of things at play here. And so I was just going to go through a few things here, intrapersonal and interpersonal factors, and then environmental and socioeconomic. But there's a lot of information out there, and it's a huge, huge topic. Well, intrapersonal factors are things like genetics, although we can't blame genetics too much because probably genetics only accounts for about 25 to 40% of obesity patients. Taste preference is definitely a problem. That's part of the shift that we've had over the years. We're probably teaching our kids, and they're being taught again by television and the media particularly, about sweets and high-fat foods. These are better tasting foods. They're not healthy, but they're better tasting. And so we've had a shift, and we may be teaching our children about taste to condition their taste to this preference for sweets and high-fat food. Nutrition knowledge, well, actually nutrition knowledge doesn't play a big role. If you look at children that are a little bit older in their later teenage years and questioned about their nutrition knowledge, the obese and the non-obese children actually have the same knowledge. So these overweight kids, they know what's good nutrition because they're getting some of that education at school, but it's not being applied. And motivation is a big issue. Motivation meaning, if you have on a reasonable day the chance to sit and play a video game after school or go and ride your bike for an hour, it's hard to get motivated to ride your bike because video games are pretty exciting these days compared to when I was a kid. Interpersonal factors, family eating patterns are very important. One study showed that families that sit down and eat dinner together, if you look at a group of 9-year-olds to 14-year-olds who were sitting down and eating dinner as a family, those kids were eating, on average, significantly more fruits and vegetables than the kids that had a more sporadic eating habit at home for dinner time. Parenting style, which was kind of interesting. Again, as a parent, this was kind of interesting to me, but parenting style has a big role. Those parents who are overbearing and controlling actually have a negative effect on children's weight. And there's a well-known phenomenon, which I never would have believed unless I read it, about the maternal impact, particularly on daughters. So how mothers may pressure their daughters because they feel that they're overweight. Well, that pressure has a negative effect and tends to cause girls, particularly of the teenage years, to gain weight. And peer influence, as you can imagine, is a huge issue. Peer influence to do with anything, to do with what they're eating at school, what they're ordering in the cafeteria, to playing after school. If there's a group getting together and they're going to have some sort of video game competition, then why are you going to go out and ride your bike? You're going to want to go and take part in that. So there's a big influence of peers too, and it's a general mindset. And so if most are doing a certain activity after school, you want to be like your peers. Environmental factors, how we feed our children at school, it's a big issue. It's getting more attention now, but it's by far not solved. I can tell you that I still have great concerns about the meals that my son gets at school, and we most often send our kids with bagged lunches where we have more control over what they're getting. Vending machines is a huge issue, and vending machines at school is a huge issue. I can't remember the exact number, but I think that back in 2000, in the whole state of Colorado, Coca-Cola had a $100 million an account with the high schools in Colorado so that they could put Coca-Cola in all the high schools in Colorado. Well, that's obviously going to have a huge impact on this particular problem of childhood obesity. And eating out. We're a society that eats out too much, but definitely much, much more than 30 years ago. And eating out not only leads to more of these high-calorie type foods, but the portions are much larger. The other thing is, in terms of environment, is exercise. This was interesting to me. In 1997, which is just 6 years ago, only 27% of high school students attended physical education classes every day. Of course, it's a little bit higher if you look at twice a week, but only a quarter of high school students were attending some sort of physical education every day. And the socioeconomic factors are huge as well. Look at this number, $25 billion. The food industry spends $25 billion just on advertising and promoting alone. And often, these kind of advertisements, as you know, they target specific types of people. If they want to target teenagers, they will. And the other interesting thing is that for our lower income parts of the country, there's a big problem. I mean, we don't have this problem here in our community, but 1/3 of Americans with incomes less than $15,000 per year, which is directly associated with where they live and unsafe neighborhoods, have openly stated that they will not walk outside in their neighborhood for fear of being unsafe. Well, a little bit about what happens with overweight and obesity type situations. These are some general physiology things that happen in the body. Blood pressure goes up. There's a decreased ability to handle glucose, which is very, very important because this glucose intolerance is what eventually leads to diabetes. Cholesterol goes up. It leads to an increased risk of coronary disease in adulthood, and there are a lot of bone and joint problems that start during childhood and then continue into adulthood. And here's the list of associated illnesses. I mentioned high blood pressure, which is at the bottom there, hypertension, HTN, but there's a whole host of other problems. Sleep apnea, where there's problems with breathing at night. And in children, that leads to learning difficulties and short-term memory deficits. Asthma is a big problem directly associated with childhood obesity, and diabetes, as I said, type 2 specifically. You can also get GERD is gastroesophageal reflux disease, fancy way of saying heartburn or indigestion, which is a problem. And it's a problem that starts also in childhood and may need medical treatment with drugs. And depression. Depression is also a big problem, as I'm going to show in a second. These are the psychosocial consequences of childhood obesity. These children receive negative attitudes from their peers, and that, again, leads to depression and low self-esteem, which leads to problems in the future, such as decreased lifetime earnings capacity, decreased lifetime education level, decreased probability of marriage, increased alcohol and substance abuse. So these problems carry through their life from early on. Well, there was a policy statement released by the American Academy of Pediatrics, which I think was probably long overdue, and it came in 2003. And there were some recommendations that were made, which I'll just highlight to you. But it's important that we promote healthy eating patterns. We need to respect a child's appetite, but avoid pre-prepared meals and decrease or avoid high-calorie foods. Food should never be used as a reward or a punishment. In terms of activity, we need to limit TV and video time to less than 2 hours a day, which has definitely been shown to be successful. Promote physical activity at home and at school, and increase family activities. Family activities have been shown to curb this overweight problem, even if it doesn't involve something such as exercise, riding your bike or walking even. Just stopping to watch TV and to play a game as a family will make a difference if it's done on a regular basis. Board game, for example. Apply healthy parental role modeling. I really believe that that's a very important one. And encourage discussion of health habits with children. It's very, very important. So that they not only get educated at school, because they're all getting educated at school. I'm getting the flyers home. I mean, the education is coming, but that discussion needs to continue at home as well. So in summary, childhood obesity is an important public health problem, and the cause is multifactorial, as you saw, and it leads to many different health problems later in life. So we need to focus on primary prevention, and particularly important is that it's very well shown now that the success is limited later in life. We will have a lot more success treating our children and making sure that they don't grow up overweight, then we will have, in terms of the programs, the success with the programs we've had treating adults that are already overweight or obese. And of course, this successful treatment will definitely reduce the subsequent health problems in adulthood. Thank you. Actually, if I had more time, there are recommendations that the Academy has put out for pediatricians specifically. These are general, these are general recommendations, but actually we are not calculating body mass index enough in our kids specifically. I mean, I think everybody should know their body mass index. If you can remember this, because I just did this last night on myself, but it's a very easy calculation. You take your weight and you multiply it by 705. Then you have to divide it by your height in inches, and then you divide it again by your height in inches. So 705 times your weight, and that's in pounds, divided by your height in inches, divided by your height again in inches. And that'll give you your body mass index. And you would like ideally you'd like to have a body mass index of 25 or less. 705 times your weight in pounds. And this is, I choose this calculation because it's a lot easier. I mean, we don't work in kilograms and meters in terms of our height. So 705 times your pound weight. And divide that by your height in inches. So if you're 5'4", that's 64 inches. So 705 times your weight divided by your height, and then divide that number by your height again. And it's a rough estimate, but it's pretty good.
Excuse me. In my age group, a lot of us benefited immensely from mandatory physical education. Not only the activity, but the exposure to various activities which might have planted the seed for the benefit of lifetime physical activity.
Right.
Therefore, I'm of the opinion that that was a terrible mistake when we went away from that in school. Are people like yourself able to have any impact on that and try to get PE back? I know we're trying to do too much in the schools, but this was not something that we should have thrown out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. The problem, the bigger problem, I think, is that, we've all heard it, there are certain programs that take a lower priority in school. So when the budget starts getting squeezed, the first problems that we've had were with physical education at school and music programs as well. There is a push now, I've noticed, to try to bring that back as best as possible, at least by having some of the teachers and parents volunteer for such after-school activities. For instance, just as an example, at my son's school, you can take part in gymnastics after school. It's only twice a week, but you can go directly from class at the end of the day to the gym to go through 45 minutes or an hour of gymnastics. But there is some effort being made, but there's definitely not enough. And it's not just that. I mean, there are a lot of. I mean, it's our whole. If I just remember from the time when I was a kid, just the simple act of getting to school. Even. I mean, I never got a lift to school from my parents. I mean, I had to walk or take my bike to school every single day. Somewhere along the line, we've lost that. The kids, no matter how close to school they live, the kids just about all either take the bus or they get a lift. And so it's a complete shift in our mindset. And I agree with you. It's sad and it's a big problem. And it would be nice to see even more effort to try to bring that back. Well, The kinds of activity that are considered vigorous are things like riding your bike, running, playing basketball, not walking necessarily. Walking is called a moderate activity, so just to give you an idea. Yeah. You know, there is an increased risk of depression which increases the risk of suicide. That I know for sure. Whether anorexia and bulimia are on the rise, you know, recently, I'm not sure. Yeah. You know, it's a very with teenage girls. I think it's very fragile issue. Actually, you know, I was reading all this about mothers and teenage daughters, which obviously, you know, with my bias as a dad, immediately makes me think that dad needs to take a bigger role, because it's not directly related to what dad talks about with his daughter. So I think that fathers could play a bigger role. I think that those girls need to have some control, and so the best thing you can do is to make sure that they're well educated and that there's an open line of communication with them. And other than that, other than encouraging activity and family dinners, you know, at least as regularly as you can, I think that's all you can do. But I think that would make a big difference alone.
Somebody said something earlier about being 50. Age 43, you got to start buying these things at Shopko. I swore I'd never do that. Can't even read a computer without them. I'm going to talk today for a little bit on how do we manage providing health care, not just in Missoula, but also equivalent quality in the cities and towns that surround us, which, as you all know, there's nothing closer than 40 minutes, which is probably Hamilton and Ronan and the other direction, somewhere around an hour. And what we've done over the last 2 years is try to put together a program to help improve the relationships between these institutions and put the same types of skills that we have here in Missoula out there where patients who may have trouble coming to Missoula can access them. What we did was work on try to create a regional network of providers that would be a team. So you can think of this team as the smaller primary hospitals, which are all over western Montana, even as far as Shelby, where we fly once a month to provide cardiac care. And then physicians in each of those places, and here in Missoula. And our goal was to try to figure out a way to improve the care of patients, because 60% of all the admissions to St. Pat's come from outside Missoula County, which is a pretty impressive number if you think about it. And so a lot of those patients have to come here for everything, and over the next few years we're going to work on that. And what we did is try to identify who our partners would be in this process. And by we, I don't know if he's here, but I should have Tim Engberg. He's not here. My previous boss who was the vice president of the Heart Institute and is now director of outreach, and I started this a couple years ago. So these are the people that we're working with at this time, maybe others in the future. And we tried to figure out where should we start this process. And of course, it's a rather daunting task to say that you're going to take everything that exists in a tertiary hospital like St. Pat's and do that everywhere in 10 different towns, from Salmon to Shelby to Dillon to as far away as Ennis. And that's just not possible. You have to start somewhere. The other thing is, where is the funding going to come from? I would bet if I asked how many of you are rich, there would be 0 hands that would be raised. I can tell you if I asked how many of these rural hospitals are rich, none of them would say that. With Medicare the way it is and dropping each year in its reimbursements, we had to come up with some type of a funding system to make this work. And I'll explain to you a little bit about that. In terms of what we're trying to do, we're going to start off with EKGs. How many of you are heart patients? How many of you ever had an EKG? Actually, I asked how many of you were rich, so give them a card. We want some money. No, I'm just kidding. So we're going to start off with trying to not just have it so you have an EKG everywhere, which you can get today. But one of the problems is, and the way this got started really 2 years ago, was a patient who had already had a heart attack, was in a distant hospital, needed an EKG for chest pain, got his EKG, was not normal. Well, then what happens? The doctor has to guess. Is it not normal because of a previous heart attack, or is it not normal because there's something new going on? And in that case, couldn't tell, and the patient had to get flown here by life flight. It was from Polson at that time. And the patient was taken to the heart cath lab, but on the way there, one of our people in the cath lab handed me the folder. That patient not only had an EKG that was the same as before, but had already had a heart cath 6 months earlier by a different physician, which was normal. And the patient didn't remember that. So really, it was a total waste of resources and a problem for the patient's family, who had to drive all over and be very worried about it. And that's really where all this got started. So we wanted to have it where all physicians in Western Montana, or care providers, would have access to the equivalent information no matter where you are. And then we got started with this. Other things that we think we're going to be able to do with this when the system is up and running will include doing x-rays on a 24-hour basis, having interpretation by people here. This is already in some cities in Western Montana. Plains is putting it in. Not exactly sure where else it is right now, but I know Plains is soon to get that going. Pharmacy, a lot of these smaller towns do not have 24-hour pharmacy. It's pretty hard when there's only one local pharmacist and they work part-time at the hospital as well as their personal store. And what we're going to do by this summer is start off with, we built or bought a EKG or ECG, it's the same thing, server, which is just a piece of computer hardware that sits in a room. And all the machines here at St. Pat's actually store electronically on this machine, so that anyone on any machine in St. Pat's can have access to those EKGs. It is set up where it can be retrieved over the internet, but the present system is pretty clumsy in doing that. Western Montana Clinic is already part of this system, and what we're proposing, or actually are in the process of implementing, purchasing all the equipment right now as we speak, is to bring in these other groups such that we're all a team. The Salish Kootenai Tribal Health already has it in place. They were our first alpha test site, if you want to call it that. And there's 3 machines spread out between St. Ignatius, Ronan, and Arlee that all communicate with this server centrally over a modem, so that we have access to all of their information. And in fact, they call us a couple times a month and say, would you look at an EKG? And we just call it up on the system, and we have all the comparison ones from if they were ever here at St. Pat's. So that's where we hope to be. It sounds simple, but the issues are, how do you pay for this? And, this is actually fairly expensive. When the system's fully complete, it'll be over $500,000. How do you transmit these images? And modem is one way, but it's pretty slow. Fortunately, there are more and more hospitals and clinics even in Western Montana that are now on the internet. So this system is designed to actually transmit over the internet. It's almost instantaneous. Where do you store? Well, the storage system itself is almost $100,000. It has all the software and security. Everything has to be secure, as you might imagine. If it's going out over the internet, there's protocols that have to be done or managed. And then how does it get viewed? And that was really one of the big issues. Up until recently, every system that was out there required some type of a proprietary piece of software. Well, you know, if you're only talking about St. Pat's, that's not a big deal, because you can put it on any machine you want locally. If you spread this out over, I think it's about 10,000 square miles, and how many PCs are in that, you can't do it that way. You have to have something that works through Internet Explorer. How many of you browse the internet, out of curiosity? Vast majority. Good. So this will be something that anybody who has Windows XP and a browser can access if they have proper security. So you probably won't be able to get into it. If you can, you better let me know. All right. I'm going to move on quickly. There are other things that we hope to do with this as we move forward. The EMR is an electronic medical record. I don't know how much you know about this, but President Bush has been saying a lot about this. He hasn't put much money into it, but he's certainly interested in creating the infrastructure to build electronic medical records because it can save money and save lives. It's not easy to do because most places have proprietary systems today, and there's no single national standard to marry these systems. But we have some ideas, and we have good partners who are interested in doing that. Also, we have protocols. If you have a heart attack and you're anywhere in western Montana, you are likely to receive care based on the protocol that we've disseminated from here to every emergency room in all the places I've talked about, which involves getting specific life-saving drugs. But we want to get those on the computer because right now to update those, as you might imagine, we have to send it to 20 different places, so we don't update it too frequently. If we could have it in a web browser, it'd be instantaneous. These are just some of the things we're talking about doing in the future. Basically, the centerpiece would be a regional patient record, which different groups would all have access to and input into. So it would be a communal record no matter where you go for your health care. Future, some of it is here, some of it is not. I'm going to show you a little clip from KPAX that was on TV last Friday night about echo in planes. It's interesting, just a brief aside, friend Dean French, who's a physician, chief of staff there in planes, called me up last Friday and said, hey, he saw a national feed segment on KPAX that involved a certain new kind of echo. And he said, hey, we got that machine right here in planes, and you guys read off that machine. So we called up KPAX, and they were quite surprised and came out and took a look at our stuff. This is a little 30-second segment. I don't know if this will work or not. Can you hear that?
Where it's read by a specialist. The doctors say the state-of-the-art machine is truly improving patient care. Between their community.
That's my partner, Dr. Barry.
With us, and I think ultimately it provides better care for the patients.
If we're providing top-of-the-line
Amy's our chief echo tech.
care that says what we really care about our patients and our communities and people that we're providing the service to.
The new machine is funded by the Montana Cardiology Telemedicine Network. The network helps rural hospitals provide adequate health care for its patients. So,
I don't know if can you hear that? No. Well, unfortunately, you can't hear it, but some of these clips like this guy are actually in New York City. This thing was, the clip that was on KPAX was how great this hospital is in New York City that's showing this three-dimensional, you saw those bubbles kind of moving, that's a three-dimensional view of the heart. The thing is, we're doing this here in western Montana. They're doing it in planes. We read them in Missoula. So that was the interesting piece of this. Of course, they didn't know that that was happening locally. And again, that's funded by this network. Well, why are we doing this? We have a good quality institution. This is 2004 data from on the web, healthgrades.com. We have a 10% mortality rate with a full-service institution. You've seen what they've been doing with heart surgery here, which is pretty amazing. And because of the quality, we want to work with these partners around the state. Unfortunately, neither we nor they have a lot of money, so we've been looking for funding. We were lucky to get, as a start of this, from Paul G. Allen Foundation. That's the guy who started Microsoft with Bill Gates. You don't hear as much about Paul Allen, but he is equally as well-to-do. And he has a medical foundation since he has some medical problems, and we received a matching grant for $300,000. We had to come up with federal funding. We started working with our legislators. We also got a Phyllis and Dennis Washington Foundation grant. And then We were fortunate to have money from the federal government through the efforts of Senator Burns and Senator Baucus. We received some money for the Heart Institute Foundation to do vascular work. That's under the aegis of Dr. Duran. I think you met him earlier. And then $700,000, which we have not received yet, but will later this spring or early summer in fiscal year 2005 to get this thing off the ground. It's for a total of $1 million. Most importantly, we're glad you're here. So, questions? Quick story, how did we get this money from the Dennis Washington Foundation? They actually mostly give to children's things. It's a classic story of what we're trying to do, which is a gentleman who was in his 50s or early 60s, was in Dillon hunting last fall, had chest pain, went to the emergency room there, ended up having an EKG, which had to be faxed here. We tried to find old ones, couldn't. He got the appropriate medications and a heart cath and a stent for his heart attack, and he helped us get that money because he understood the value of this. He's actually from Missoula, but was in Dillon. So a lot of you hunt outside of this county, so I hope you hunt outside the county, I guess. Questions? Yes, the question is the new medical privacy law getting in the way of anything we're doing? HIPAA, which is the Health Insurance or Information Portability Act. Am I close? HIPAA is the big thing. In medicine, every one of you who's ever been to a doctor is now signing extra papers saying that it's okay for your doctor to even look at your records, basically. And that's the HIPAA papers. And that affects us dramatically because it also has a lot of implications for security for any information that leaves either your doctor's office or the hospital and goes out over the internet. It all has to be done in secure transmission with certain security issues. There's a lot of issues with that.
Is it getting in the way of the overall impact of what you're trying to do?
Well, is it getting in the way? It just makes it more expensive. It adds several layers on top of it. And frankly, we haven't really figured out when it comes to EKG is one thing. It's pretty simple, and I don't think HIPAA is going to say much. When it comes to sharing your full electronic medical record, how are we going to do that? We haven't really come up with. Neither has the president. But hopefully together, obviously he's not calling me, but he's going to have to figure out what he's going to do to bypass HIPAA. Because sharing information among multiple providers without you, the patient, signing a document for every provider who looks at it today is not legal. Even though it's in your best interest. If you come in sick and you get in a car accident and you're near Plains and that's where you go, you want them to have your records from St. Pat's or your private doctor's office here in Missoula. But right now, that's a big deal. Oh, it's part of it. Phase 1 is what I'm showing. In phase 1, which is we need to complete by this summer, Plains, Anaconda, Polson. Phase 2 actually starts with Hamilton, and then several other places as well, Dillon, Deer Lodge, so on. We have to do it in phases. We can't do it all at once. But yes, they are part of it.
Already they are part of it?
Yeah, there's a group. I'm not part of it. Tim here? No. There's a group of hospital administrators that meet now. That it's a rural network coalition. And Hamilton is part of that group. Hamilton, Polson, Plains, Shelby, Anaconda, Dillon, St. James Hospital in Butte. All those places are coming together and actually working on this thing as in total. Yeah, but they're going to be part of it. The question is, to what extent will this be proprietary versus compatible? Actually, that's a very key question, and it's all going to be compatible because everything we are doing must be open standard. Otherwise, we won't purchase the products. So in this case, this software we're purchasing for the EKG server has only been installed in one other place in the country at the moment, Seventh-day Adventist Hospital starting in Orlando, Florida. And the reason that we chose it, which is a bit scary to be the second test site, but It's the only one available that is open standard. It's all based on Microsoft database, Microsoft security standards, which may be an oxymoron, but depending on what you know about computers. But it's all open. I don't mean open in that anybody can get to it, but it's open standard so that it can talk to anything else. By using the usual methods of query or asking the database, you can get that information. The actual EKG, if you're computer literate, is stored in called XML, which is any browser can see it, unlike some other competing products which are all proprietary. That is a key piece of whatever we purchase. Anything else? Thanks.
Well, it's really a wonderful opportunity to be able to be here at the end of this day. And I see all of you walking around with big bags of information to take with you so that your learning continues beyond today. But as I start this morning, I guess it's afternoon now, isn't it? Is it this afternoon? What I would ask you to do, if you would, and this is just very simple, you're right here, nobody's going to necessarily see this, but if you would just point to yourself, just point to yourself. Now, what I can see that the rest of you can't see is that there isn't a one of you in here that pointed here when I said point to yourself. You all pointed where? To your heart. So when we talk about who we are, and when we talk about our hearts, we're talking about something very significant. Because as you go on about your day today, what I hope to be able to do in these last few minutes is to specifically focus on you. All that we've been about here this morning is all about you. And whereas there are tons and tons and tons of information available, what's very significant is you. So, this last piece is entitled The Value of Taking Care of Yourself. And so when I talk about heart, I'm really talking about yourself. The Chinese pictograph for the word busy includes two words. The first one, maybe it's better if I just do this, because busy, heart plus killing. So what the Chinese people know is that busyness is really deadening to our hearts. Now we can talk about that in terms of all of the medical and scientific ways that you've learned about already this morning, about our physical hearts and what busyness does to our physical hearts. But what the Chinese describe about busyness goes beyond the physical body or the physical heart to what we know to be the heart of who we are. So when you think about our busy lives, how is it that that busyness is deadening or killing to your heart? This is hard for me, but I just may make myself stand back here. So what I would ask you to rate yourself as we do this little piece, how important is it to you to take care of yourself? Just think about that. How well are you doing at taking care of yourself? On a scale of 1 to 10. How confident are you that you can improve your self-care? How confident are you that you can sustain improvements? And how willing are you to take the steps necessary to improve your self-care? On a scale of 1 to 10. Some of the facts and some of the statistics that we've heard already today, at least for me, and I'm assuming for you as well, are really staggering. I mean, it's just amazing what we know. And we can truly make some changes in our own personal lives to change the statistics in the future. So, what we're talking about here is value. And so what I'd like to ask you to think about is your own personal values. And so if I were to ask you, what do you value? Just think about the things that you might name. And when I'm going to give you a list, I'm going to give you a list of values, and just for yourself. Is this a value to you? Family, your friends, health, wisdom, love, self-respect, wealth, inner peace, freedom, control, trust, loyalty, faith, spirituality, support, and then others that you might come up with. Now again, in your own mind, what I would just invite you to do is out of those 15, and then maybe the others that you are naming for yourself, pick 5 of those. Which 5 of those would you say are your top 5 values? Everybody have 5? Okay, you have those 5. Now, out of those 5, pick 3. So what would be your top 3 values? And we're going to narrow it just a little bit more. What would you say is your number 1 or your most important value out of the 5 and then 3 that you selected out of those 15? Now, if you'd be willing to, at least by show of hand, how many of you picked health as your top? How many of you picked family? Okay, just think about that for a minute. If you don't have your health, what do you have to give your family? And so when we think about the value of taking care of ourselves, one of the very most important things that we can do is very simply to take care of ourselves. So how many, for how many of you was health among your top 3? Okay, so health is pretty important. Health is pretty important. So we need to make it a priority. Now, anybody remember what the definition of insanity is? Doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So this morning, I just happened to be in the grocery store this morning, and I saw a magazine by the checkout stand, and it said, lose 10 pounds in 10 minutes. Man, if it only took 10 minutes. Yeah, and I have to say to you, I was just almost tempted to buy the magazine. And that's, that's how our minds work, is we want things to change in our lives, but we continue to do the same things and expect a different result. So as you move on about your day today, again, what this session is about is you. And so what I'm asking you to do is to just take a step back from all of the information, from everything that you have learned and everything that you've gathered today, and simply pause for a moment and think about yourself and where you are in relationship to taking care of your heart. Again, you remember when I asked you to point to yourself, you all went here. The heart of who we are. Now, life involves a lot of challenges. I mean, we could have a conversation, start over there and move this way, and talk about all the things that we have going on in our lives. And we could start here, and you could say, well, I have this, this, and this, and someone over here could say, oh man, that isn't anything. You should hear what I have going on. I mean, the winds are blowing us in a lot of different ways. And so when we talk about taking care of ourselves, it's like, who's got time? Or all the other things. What about my kids? What about this? What about all these things? But the truth of the matter is, we have got to stop and step back and recognize that if I do not pay attention to here, there is nothing available for here. And so all of the challenges that are available to us, just a little Frank and Ernest there, this is the first moment of the rest of your life. Now, for some of us, that's just too much pressure. Or this, the Institute for the Study of Emotional Stress. Hey, I feel better already. The world is too big for us. Too much is going on, too many crimes, too much violence and excitement. Try as you will, you get behind in the race in spite of yourself. It's a constant strain to keep pace, and still you lose ground. Science empties its discoveries on you so fast that you stagger beneath them in hopeless bewilderment. The political world is news seen rapidly. You're out of breath trying to keep pace with who's in and who's out. Everything is high pressure. Human nature can't endure much more. Sound familiar some days? Right off the front of a Hallmark card. Atlantic Journal, June 16th, 1883. So when we think about our lives and how they move, and for many of us thinking about how easy it was years ago, realizing that busyness is a matter of our perspective. And we would think that in 1883, that was the simple life. And yet, that's an expression of what we're experiencing today, however many years later. Over 100. And so, what is the value of taking care of myself? And again, I would just ask you to think about that. What is the value of taking care of yourself? What do you like to do? Who are the significant people in your life? Is there music still inside of you that wants to be expressed? The connections and relationships that are so significant to us. And the sheer delight of being loved. All of us have many balls in the air, regardless of what point in life we are. And we try to juggle all those things and keep them all going. And the question that I would ask is, how is it that you find balance? How do you keep all those things going in a rotation that is an easy, simple flow? Now, what I would suggest, and again, there aren't any of you sitting in the front row, so what you can't see, really, is that I'm standing on one foot. And so what I am doing is balancing myself in front of you. Now, why is it that I don't fall over? It's because my foot is going like this. I am not standing up here sure-footed. The only way I can keep balance is to do this dance of back and forth and around, and realizing that balance isn't about everything being equal. It is about a give and take of life. And again, remembering, for the Chinese, they recognize busy is a combination of heart and killing. And so, again, to remember, we aspire for balance. We aspire for flow. We want to be able to be at one or at peace with the world around us. And so to think about a gymnast and how they fall off of a balance beam thousands and thousands and thousands of times before they do it so gracefully before all of us in a competition. And so balancing our work and our family and our life is every bit or not, or maybe more, challenging than that. And so the challenge for us is to practice and to realize that we fall, but to get back and to work on balancing again and realizing that some days I do tip over. But how do I maintain that sense of back and forth? Where do I find that inner gyroscope, if you will, that allows all of us to go with where the strong winds of life are blowing us? So how do we find balance and better ways to cope? Highly effective people constantly work on self-awareness. Now, many of us have been taught through a variety of ways that focus on ourselves is selfish. And yet, what we have come to believe is that self-awareness is critical to being effective in our work lives, effective with our children, effective in relationships, and effective in the variety of ways that we interact with our communities. And so self-awareness is not selfish. Self-awareness is vital and critical to health, and vital and critical to healthy relationships, and vital and critical to our being able to find a sense of flow and balance in our lives. And so again, similar questions. How self-aware are you? Are you aware when you are out of balance in your life? What are the signs for yourself when you know it's time to step back and to go within so that you can gather the energy or the passion or the intention to go without? And let me say to you, unless we go within on a regular basis, we do not have the ability to go out. And so when I think about myself, I know when I'm tired, I get really sharp and maybe give a curt one-word answer. And when I hear myself, it's mostly my husband that hears those sharp one-word answers, but when I hear myself speaking like that, it is a red light or a red flag inside of my head that says, it's time to step back. Now again, life's challenging, and we got all those things in the air. And how do I do that, or how do any of us do that in the midst of all of the things that are calling us to go without? And I come back to the place, unless we go within, we do not have what we need to go out. And so for yourself, again, in terms of your own reflection, how do you know when you're out of balance? How do you know when things aren't flowing like they should? How do you know when it's time to step back, to take a deep breath, and to go within so that you have whatever it is inside that you know you want to make the impact or to do what it is that you want to do in your life? Be in good relationship with your family and your friends and the community. Make an impact with the people with whom you work. Be productive and effective in whatever ways that you want to do that. We don't often think about those things in terms of health, but self-awareness is connected to our health. So, self-care. You know, it's really not that complicated. We know what to do. It's really simple. For whatever reason, though, it seems like hard work. And so, again, this piece here is nothing that you haven't already heard this morning. It's nothing you haven't read as you stood in line to pay for your groceries on the covers of many, many magazines. It's nothing that we don't know intuitively. But as we move forth from today and go beyond this experience at this wonderful event, to again reflect upon our own self and where we are in terms of our own ability to care for ourselves. And so again, in terms of self-reflection, your bodies. What do you eat? How do you eat better? How do you prepare your food rather than buy something already prepared? And in terms of nutrition, how do I become more aware of what it is my body needs and what's healthy? And exercise and rest. In terms of my emotional self, how about the ways in which I communicate? Am I able to express what I need? Was I clear, or am I clear, on what is value for me? And does my life reflect what it is that I say I value? Did I put family number one, but work gets all of the best of me? Is family my number one value, but my actions show that other things are more important? Where do I find passion? What gets me excited? What do I like? Do I do what I enjoy? And lighten up a little bit. In terms of my mental self, do I know how to cope? How do I rest my mind and recharge my mind? Where do I go for support? Do I have interest in new things? Do I take time for leisure? And how about positive messages? And then our spiritual self. Praying, meditating, serving, giving, helping others, working on self. Now, for many of us, we may be very good at taking care of our bodies. We eat well, we sleep well, we exercise regularly, we take care of all those things, and certainly there is much around us that encourages us to do that. But to the extent that we forget about our spiritual self, or our mental self, or our emotional self, we look like this. Now, I might say that whereas this may not be visibly evident, I would be very bold as to say that probably most of us in this room look like that in here, because we focus on one piece and we forget that everything else is connected. And so I wish I could have you go through this process of making a plan as you leave today and turn in a signed version to us so that we could hold you accountable to yourself. And obviously that's not possible and not fair anyway. But the question is, as you go forth today, more enlightened, I would think, with the information that's available to you, And I'm hoping that on some level your spirits have been touched in one way or another as well, that you make some choices about how you might improve your physical self and your mental self and your emotional self and your spiritual self, realizing that all are connected and all of those things have a part to play in our health. And again, the who you are, which is your heart, the essence of yourself. Now this is just a little expression of how it might look. The stress in our lives will not go down. They were stressed in 1883 too, believe it or not. And stress goes like this. And we're continually looking for a pill that will keep our lives like this. But guess what? There is no passion in this. This is life. And this is wellness as well. We do well, and then we don't, and then we do, and then but how do we keep our focus on our health and ourselves so that we can ride this wave of life? So that when I stand on one foot, it's like this. And I don't get upset with myself because I'm not just standing flat, solid. Flow is about this. And so in terms of self-care, again, just some concepts. Passion is something that is incredibly important. It's the juice in our veins. And so in terms of passion, again, and as we go forth from today, a question to ask yourself, do you have passion for living? And perspective. Are you able to step back and to look at things and not get so caught up in the craziness of whatever event might be happening in your life or the lives of those around you? To be able to get perspective, to step back and to look and to reflect. And patience. We are often very able to be patient with those around us, but we have very little tolerance for ourselves. And patience is a self-care concept. And presence of mind. Right this minute, how many of you are thinking about what you're going to do when you leave here? And all the tasks that are going to be accomplished when you leave here? Or how many of you are thinking about what's going to happen next week or work on Monday or whatever? How many of us have the ability to be present in the moment? Because you know what? This moment is the only moment any of us have. This is it, right here. And so my ability to stay balanced is to be focused here. If I'm worried about what's going to happen there, I lose balance. If I get caught up in the guilt of what should have been then, I lose balance. Presence of mind is to be truly present where I am right here and right now. So, I have a little story to tell you. There were two prime ministers visiting in the chambers of one of the prime ministers. And as they were having their conversation about the state of their respective nations, the doors flung open, and this man came running in, yelling and screaming and all upset, and the home prime minister said, Richard, calm down. Remember rule number 6. And Richard came to complete calm and said, oh, thank you, sir. And he bowed and backed his way out of the chambers. And so the two prime ministers continued their conversation, and all of a sudden, the doors flung open, and this woman came running in, screaming. Her hair was flying, and she was all upset. And the Prime Minister just very calmly looked up to her and said, "Mary, calm down. Remember rule number 6. And immediately, just like Richard before her, she came to complete calm and bowed and said, "Oh, thank you, sir," and left. Well, it happened a third time. And so after that, the visiting prime minister said to his partner, "My dear colleague, would you be so kind as to share with me your rule number 6? And he said, "Well, certainly." "Don't take yourself so damn seriously." And he looked and he said, "Well, very well, sir. Could you tell me the other rules?" "There aren't any." I know for me, I can get very, very caught up in the seriousness of life. And especially hanging around here at St. Pat's, there are some very, very intense things that happen here every day. People's lives are vulnerable and frail. But the remembrance for all of us, how do we find balance? How do we stay focused? How do we have presence of mind? Where do we find passion? How do we find flow? Don't take ourselves so seriously. In every moment, we have the opportunity to change or to grow, to be kind, to give, to enjoy, to try new things, to contribute, to choose, to smile, to connect, to love, and to believe. In the adventures of each day, we have an opportunity to discover the best in ourselves. And it's your responsibility to take care of yourself. Why? Because you have some values that are very important to you. And where do those values come from? Deep inside here. And when I ask you to point to yourself, you point here. We're talking about our hearts. We're talking about the heart, the essence of who we are. It's your responsibility to take care of yourself because you have values. And no one else is going to do it for you. We are responsible for our professional and our personal balance. And it must be a priority. To put the world in order, we must first put the nation in order. To put the nation in order, we must put our family in order. To put the family in order, we must cultivate our personal life. To cultivate our personal life, we must first set our hearts right. And the question that is most important to us at very significant times in our lives: was I loved, and did I love well? And in closing, I would just like to share with you a little prayer. Eternal dwelling place, I know all things are passing. My final home is not here. Yet I zoom mindlessly through my days, missing the passionate gift of life. How differently I would enter each day if I embraced the shortness of my lifespan. The things I consider inconveniences would have a different colored hue. The work I feel driven to accomplish would pale beside relationships I cherish. The irritations and the angers would dissolve as I inhaled the preciousness of life. Joyful journeyer, I hear you call to me this day. Behold, enjoy, appreciate. Welcome all who enter this new day. Live wild with rapturous wonder. Look with awe and smile with elation. Forgive those who stand at a distance. Thank those who have settled in your heart. Be tender with the rough edges of yourself. taste each morsel of life with fullness. May I live each day with heartiness, keeping things in clear perspective, recognizing that this day before me might truly be my last. You know, as I think about all of this, what's this? All that we're about today. And as I look out at all of you and know that each one of us has a lifetime of experience, and we could share the wonderful, exciting, joyous things that we've experienced, and always knowing that they are balanced against the painful struggles that we have. Now, what I know is I ain't much, but I'm all I've got. And the same thing is true for all of us. And again, as you think for yourself what's important and what you value and who it is that you are, acknowledging that it is an absolute gift to ourselves and a gift to those around us to take care of this precious gift that we have. We have today, and we have hope for tomorrow. And the choices that I make in terms of my physical body, in terms of my emotional self, in terms of what I put into my mind, and in terms of my inner spirit, all of those things are significant for ourselves. And so we may not be much, but we're all we got. And so I would invite you to go forth today giving yourself the privilege and the gift of taking care of yourself. This is a wonderful honor for us to be able to celebrate 30 years of cardiac surgery and 30 years of learning how to deal with the heart. And also to say, for us at St. Patrick Hospital, we've been here for 132 years dealing with the heart. Not always the physical heart, but the spiritual heart as well. And so thank you for the privilege of being able to serve you in the way that we do. And blessings on the rest of your day.